My mom texted, "We changed the locks, you don't have a home anymore." Half an hour later, their lawyer emailed me, "We have a problem. Call immediately." My name is Lyra, and I'm 27 years old, an independent artist in Denver trying to make ends meet. I was finishing a commission at my studio when my phone buzzed. The message from my mom read, "We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now." It felt like being punched in the stomach. I couldn't breathe. For 2 days, I struggled with homelessness and betrayal. Then an email arrived from our family lawyer, "We have a problem. Call immediately." Growing up, I had always been a daddy's girl. My father, Thomas, taught me everything about art and creativity. He spent hours with me in his small home studio, teaching me to mix colors and see the world through an artist's perspective. Those were my happiest childhood memories, laughing, painting, talking about everything under the sun. He believed I had a special gift that needed sharing with the world. But then cancer took him when I was 15. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, 3 months from diagnosis to death. The void he left was enormous. My mother, Rebecca, had been a strong, loving elementary school teacher with a wonderful sense of humor. But losing Dad changed her completely. She became withdrawn and anxious. 2 years later, she met William at a school fundraiser. He was a successful businessman who owned several real estate companies across Colorado. On the surface, he was charming and seemed to genuinely care about my mother. They married quickly, just 6 months after meeting. Suddenly we moved from our cozy house to a large mansion in the suburbs. We had house staff, luxury cars, designer clothes. Mom quit teaching because William insisted she didn't need to work anymore. When my half-sister Emma was born, things changed even more. Emma was 7 years younger and became the center of attention. She was William's biological child, and he clearly favored her. My mother unconsciously began following his lead. The mansion never felt like home. Every corner reminded me this was William's house, not ours. The only space that felt somewhat mine was the small room I'd converted into an art studio, where I kept all the supplies and paintings my father had left me. As I grew older, the differences between William's vision for my life and my own became apparent. He considered art a hobby at best, a waste of time at worst. He wanted me to study business or law, something practical that guaranteed financial success. My mother, who once encouraged my artistic pursuits, began echoing his sentiments. "Maybe William is right," she would say. "Art is a difficult career path. We just want what's best for you." But I knew what was best for me. It wasn't sitting in an office crunching numbers, it was creating, expressing, bringing beauty into the world just like my father had taught me. The arguments increased in frequency and intensity. William criticized my choice of friends, my clothes, my late nights painting, and especially my decision to major in fine arts. Despite their objections, I made a decision that would forever change our relationship, a decision that would eventually lead me to that devastating text message and the surprising events that followed. After graduation, I found a small apartment near the Arts District in Denver. It was tiny, barely 500 square feet with peeling wallpaper and temperamental heating, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I could breathe freely without William's disapproving glances or my mother's disappointed sighs. The rent was steep, but the location was perfect. I was within walking distance of several galleries and studios, and most importantly, close to Morrison's art collective, where I'd secured an entry-level position. The pay barely covered rent and groceries, but I was learning from some of the most talented artists in the city. My boss, Marcus, was a renowned sculptor who'd taken a chance on me after seeing my portfolio. "You have raw talent, Lyra," he'd said. "With the right guidance and hard work, you could really make a name for yourself." My mother's reaction was predictable. First came the guilt trips. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By abandoning your family." Then the comparisons. "Your cousin Jennifer just got accepted to law school, and here you are throwing your life away on finger paintings." Finally, cold acceptance tinged with disappointment. "Fine, do what you want, but don't come crying to us when you can't pay your bills." William was less subtle. "This is a mistake you'll regret. The real world isn't kind to dreamers, Lyra. When you fail, don't expect us to bail you out." Their words hurt, but I was determined to prove them wrong. I worked tirelessly, often putting in 14-hour days between my job and my own artwork. Slowly but surely, My pieces began selling in local shops and small galleries. About 6 months after moving out, I remembered something important. Before my father died, he'd set up a trust fund for me with his life insurance money and savings. It wasn't a fortune, but it was meant to help me through college and perhaps provide a down payment for a house someday. The trust had matured when I turned 25, 2 years ago. I called my mother to ask about it. Her response was evasive. "Oh, that old thing. I think William reinvested it for you. It's all very complicated. We can discuss it at Thanksgiving." Thanksgiving came, and I returned to the mansion, hoping for clarity about my inheritance. The dinner was tense, with William dominating conversation about his latest business ventures and Emma's achievements in elementary school. I waited until dessert to bring up the trust fund. "Mom, about Dad's trust fund for me. I was wondering if I could access it now. I'm thinking of buying a small condo instead of renting." The silence was deafening. William put down his fork deliberately. "That money is gone, Lyra." "What do you mean gone?" "We needed it for investments," my mother jumped in, her voice high and nervous. "For the family, for Emma's future." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That was my inheritance from Dad. How could you use it without telling me? "You were a minor when the decisions were made," William said coldly. "Your mother had legal authority to manage those funds as she saw fit." That was the last straw. I left that night and didn't speak to them for months, not knowing that the worst betrayal was yet to come. The revelation came unexpectedly on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in spring. I was at a small cafe near my studio, sketching ideas for a new series, when someone called my name. Looking up, I saw an older gentleman with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that seemed familiar. "Lyra? Lyra Chambers? Good Lord, you look just like your father." The man introduced himself as Frank Morrison, a former colleague and close friend of my father's. They'd worked together at Dad's graphic design company for over a decade before my father's illness. "I've been meaning to reach out for years," Frank said, sliding into the chair across from me. "But after Thomas passed, your mother made it clear the family needed space. And then when she married that man." His voice trailed off, and something in his expression made my heart skip. Over the next hour, Frank told me a story that made my blood run cold. My father's company, Chambers Creative Design, had been moderately successful with a loyal client base and solid reputation. When Dad got sick, William, who at that time was just an acquaintance with a business background, had offered to help manage the company during treatment. "Your father was so grateful," Frank explained. "He was worried about providing for you and your mother if the worst happened." William seemed like a godsend. But according to Frank, William's help came with hidden motives. As my father's condition worsened, William maneuvered himself into greater control. He convinced my father to sign over increasing shares of the business, supposedly to streamline decision-making during the crisis. "By the time your father passed, William owned 51% of Chambers Creative," Frank said heavily. "Within 6 months, he'd merged it with one of his companies, laid off most of the original staff, including me, and stripped it for parts. The Chambers name and legacy disappeared." That conversation sparked something in me. I began investigating, reaching out to other former employees, digging through old documents I'd kept after Dad's death, searching online for records of the business transactions. What I discovered was worse than Frank had suggested. William hadn't just taken advantage of my dying father's vulnerability, he'd actively manipulated him. There were emails showing how William had presented misleading financial reports, making the company seem worse off to justify his increasing control. There were testimonies from former employees about how William had isolated my father from business partners during his final months. Most damning, I found a draft of my father's original will indicating the company was to be held in trust for me until I turned 25, with my mother receiving profits meanwhile. Somehow, that version was never formally executed. Instead, a newer version signed just weeks before Dad's death, when he was heavily medicated, left everything in my mother's control with no specific company provisions. Armed with this evidence, I made what was perhaps the biggest mistake of my life. I decided to confront my mother and William directly. I arrived at their mansion unannounced one evening, my car trunk filled with documents, my heart pounding with righteous anger. "I know what you did," I said once we were seated in their opulent living room. "I know how you stole Dad's company, how you manipulated him when he was sick and vulnerable." William's face hardened, and I realized I'd just made a very dangerous enemy. William's face hardened, but he didn't speak. My mother looked confused. Lyra, what are you talking about? William helped us during the worst time of our lives. No, Mom. He used that time to take everything Dad built. Everything that should have been ours. I pulled out the documents, laying them on the coffee table one by one. Look at these. Look at what he did. As my mother reluctantly examined the evidence, William stood up. This is ridiculous. You're delusional, Lyra. Always have been, living in some fantasy world where your father was some kind of saint and I'm the villain. These are your emails, William. Your signature on these documents. Your name on the incorporation papers that dissolved Dad's company. My mother's face went pale. William, is this true? For a moment, I thought I'd gotten through to her. But then he placed his hand on her shoulder, and I watched as she physically leaned into his touch, drawing strength from him. Rebecca, your daughter has always resented me. She's always been jealous of our happiness, of the life we've built together. Now she's trying to drive a wedge between us with these fabrications. They're not fabrications. I shouted, my composure finally breaking. Frank confirmed everything. So did half a dozen other people who worked with Dad. Frank Morrison, my mother's voice was sharp. That man was always jealous of your father's success. Now he's filling your head with lies. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, please, just look at the evidence. Talk to these people yourself. I think you should leave, William said, his voice dangerously quiet. And take your accusations with you. If you persist with this slander, I'll have no choice but to take legal action. Legal action against your own stepdaughter? You're no daughter of mine, he replied coldly. And from the way you're behaving, I'm not sure you're much of a daughter to your mother either. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to defend me. Instead, she stood and moved to William's side. I think it would be best if you left, Lyra. You've upset William. You've upset me. I don't know why you're doing this, but it needs to stop. I left that night with tears streaming down my face. But I wasn't ready to give up. I spent weeks compiling more evidence, reaching out to more of my father's colleagues, even consulting with a lawyer. The lawyer wasn't optimistic. Too much time has passed. Without your mother's cooperation, it would be difficult to prove anything. 3 days later, I returned to my apartment after a long day to find my door ajar. Inside, the place had been ransacked. My laptop was gone, along with all my external hard drives and the physical documents about my father's company. Even my sketchbooks had been taken. I called the police, but without signs of forced entry, they suggested it was likely someone I knew. I knew who was behind it. William had destroyed my evidence. I called my mother, desperate and scared. Someone broke into my apartment, Mom. They took everything. All my work, all my documents about Dad's company. It had to be William. Her response chilled me to the bone. Perhaps this is a sign, Lyra. A sign that you need to stop this crusade and move on with your life. Don't call again unless you're ready to apologize, she said, and hung up. That night was the lowest point of my life, completely alone, betrayed by the one person who should have been on my side. I had no evidence, no allies, and no clear path forward. But the worst was yet to come. I'd been staying with Marcus and his wife Sophie for nearly 3 weeks when the text message came. I was sitting in their guest room, trying to recreate sketches I'd lost in the break-in, when my phone buzzed. It was from my mother. We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now. I stared at the screen, unable to comprehend that my own mother would send something so cruel. I tried calling her immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. I tried William's number too, same result. Even the house line rang endlessly. That text confirmed my worst fears. My mother had chosen William over me, her own daughter. She'd fully embraced his version of reality where I was the troublemaker who needed punishment. I showed the message to Sophie, who'd become a supportive friend. She was outraged. This is emotional abuse, Lyra. No mother should ever speak to her child this way. I think William wrote it, I said quietly. It doesn't sound like my mom. Either way, it's unacceptable, Sophie said firmly. You can stay here as long as you need. You're not homeless. The next 2 days were a blur of grief, anger, and determination. I kept checking my phone, hoping for another message from my mother, perhaps an apology, but there was nothing. Then, exactly 48 hours after the text, an email arrived from an address I recognized, Harold Martinez, the family lawyer who'd handled my father's estate. The subject line was ominous, urgent, "We have a problem. Call immediately." My first instinct was to delete it. This had to be another trap, another way for William to manipulate me. But curiosity got the better of me. "Lyra, I need to speak with you as soon as possible regarding a matter of extreme urgency concerning your mother and stepfather. Please call my office immediately. This is not something that should be discussed via email. Harold Martinez." I showed it to Marcus, who'd become my de facto advisor. "It could be legitimate. Harold has been your family's lawyer since your father was alive, right? He has his own practice separate from William's business interests." "Yes, Dad trusted him completely. I think you should call, but be cautious. Use my phone, not yours, in case they're trying to track your location." With shaking hands, I dialed for Marcus's phone. Harold answered on the second ring. "Harold Martinez speaking." "Mr. Martinez, it's Lyra Chambers." There was an audible sigh of relief. "Lyra, thank goodness. I've been trying to reach you for days." "What is this about?" "I can't discuss all the details over the phone, but I need you to come to my office immediately. It concerns William. He's been arrested." The world seemed to tilt. Arrested for what? Financial fraud, money laundering, several other charges. The FBI has been investigating him for months. They raided your mother's house yesterday and seized computers, documents, everything. Your mother isn't under arrest, but she's being questioned as a potential accomplice. I could hardly process what I was hearing. "But what does this have to do with me?" "2 reasons," Harold said. "First, some evidence that triggered the investigation apparently came from documents similar to what you were collecting. And second, your mother asked me to contact you. Despite everything, she needs you now, Lyra." The law office of Harold Martinez and Associates was located in a stately brick building in downtown Denver. As I climbed the steps that morning, I felt like I was walking to my own trial. Harold met me in the lobby, his expression somber but kind. "She's waiting in my office. I should warn you, Lyra, she's not in good shape." When I entered, I barely recognized the woman sitting by the window. My mother had always been meticulous about her appearance, but the person before me looked like she'd aged a decade in weeks. Her hair was unwashed, clothes rumpled, eyes hollow with dark circles. "Lyra," she whispered when she saw me. She stood unsteadily as if to embrace me, but stopped when she saw my expression. "Thank you for coming. Mr. Martinez said you wanted to see me." We sat across from each other while Harold took his place behind his desk. "I'll give you privacy if you prefer," he offered. My mother shook her head. "No, please stay, Harold. I need a witness, and I might need help explaining the legal aspects." She turned to me, hands twisting nervously. "Lyra, I don't even know where to begin. There's so much I need to tell you. So much I need to apologize for." The text message would be a good start. Tears welled in her eyes. "I swear to you, I never sent that. I didn't even know about it until the FBI showed me. William took my phone that day. Said he needed to make an important call because his battery was dead. I never imagined he'd do something so cruel." "And what about everything else? The trust fund, Dad's company, the break-in?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "I knew about the trust fund. William convinced me it was necessary for family investments, for Emma's future. I was wrong to agree. As for your father's company, I knew William had taken over management, but I never understood what he'd done." Harold cleared his throat. "If I may, Lyra, there's evidence that William was administering higher doses of pain medication to your father than prescribed, particularly before meetings where important documents were signed." I felt sick. So he was deliberately keeping Dad sedated? Harold nodded grimly. My mother let out a choked sob. "I didn't know. I should have been paying attention, but I was so broken after losing Thomas. William was so confident, so reassuring. He made me feel safe when everything was falling apart." "And the break-in?" I pressed. I swear I knew nothing about that. When you called afterward, William was right there listening. He told me you were making it up for attention, that you were becoming paranoid and needed professional help. So you chose to believe him over your own daughter. Yes, she admitted, hanging her head. And there's no excuse for that. None. Harold explained that William would remain in custody pending trial. The evidence was substantial, and prosecutors believed he was a flight risk given the offshore accounts discovered. As for your mother, we're cooperating fully. We're hoping to establish that she was another victim of William's fraud. What do you need from me? I asked, still not ready to forgive but willing to listen. Your testimony about William's actions could be valuable, Harold answered. But that's entirely your decision. No one would blame you for wanting distance from this mess. My mother looked at me pleadingly. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I failed you as a mother. But please know that I love you. I've always loved you. I sat there torn between years of hurt and the undeniable evidence of my mother's own victimization. I thought about what my father would want me to do. He'd always taught me about compassion, about understanding that people make mistakes, especially when they're in pain. But he'd also taught me about self-respect and standing up for what's right. I'll testify, I said finally. Not for you, I added, looking at my mother, but for Dad. For what William did to him when he was vulnerable and dying. For the company he built that was supposed to be part of his legacy to me. Relief washed over her face. Thank you, Lyra. But I need time, I continued. I can't just pretend the last few years never happened. I can't instantly trust you again. She nodded, wiping away tears. I understand. I'll wait. However long it takes. Over the next few weeks, I was drawn deeper into the legal proceedings. I met with FBI agents, prosecutors, and financial experts. I shared everything I knew about my father's company, the trust fund, and William's pattern of manipulation. During one meeting, FBI agent Diana Rivera pulled me aside. You know, your information was the missing piece we needed. We'd been tracking William's financial irregularities for years, but we could never establish the pattern beyond reasonable doubt. Your story gave us the historical context we needed. Frank had indeed gone to the authorities after my confrontation with William, concerned for my safety. He'd witnessed William's ruthlessness firsthand and feared he might take extreme measures to silence me. The trial came, and with it a reckoning. The evidence against William was overwhelming. In addition to my testimony and Frank's, numerous financial experts detailed his complex web of fraud. Former employees spoke about his intimidation tactics. William watched me with cold hatred throughout my testimony, but for the first time, that look held no power over me. I was not a child anymore, I was my father's daughter, and I would speak the truth. The verdict came as no surprise, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison. As he was led away, William looked directly at me, his eyes promising retribution. But I felt only peace. 1 year after William's conviction, I stood in the center of a small art gallery in downtown Denver, surrounded by my work. It was my first solo exhibition, a collection titled Reconstructions, chronicling my journey from betrayal to healing. My mother and Emma entered halfway through the evening. Mom looked elegant in a simple blue dress, so different from the designer outfits William had insisted upon. Emma, now 8, bounced excitedly beside her. Lyra, this is amazing. Emma exclaimed, hugging me impulsively. Everyone's looking at your paintings. She pointed to a canvas showing 2 female figures of different heights walking hand in hand toward a sunrise. That one, it's us, right? You and me and Mom. It is, I confirmed, touched that she'd recognized the symbolism. My mother stepped forward, embracing me with warmth that was gradually returning. I'm so proud of you, Lyra. Your father would be too. The past year had been one of rebuilding, not just relationships, but lives. My mother and Emma had moved to a modest apartment in Denver, near mine. Mom had returned to teaching full-time, rediscovering her passion for education. Emma was thriving, developing her own artistic talents. Most importantly, the psychological wounds had begun healing. We'd continued individual and family therapy, learning to communicate honestly and set healthy boundaries. That evening, after the reception ended, I remained in the gallery for one last look at my exhibition. I thought about the text message that had seemed like the ultimate betrayal, but had actually been the catalyst for truth. I thought about the nature of home, how it's not necessarily a physical place, but a state of being. For years, I'd mourned the loss of my childhood home. Now I understood that home was something we could rebuild, something we carried within us and created through our connections with others. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Emma is asleep. I'm so proud of you, Lyra. Today was a testament to your talent and resilience. Love you. I smiled as I typed back, love you too, Mom. See you tomorrow for lunch. Such a simple exchange, the kind that happens between mothers and daughters every day. Yet for us, it represented something profound, a reclaiming of what had been lost, a rebuilding of trust that had once seemed irreparably broken. The message that had once proclaimed I no longer had a home had proven to be one of William's many lies. I had a home, not in the physical sense of a building with locks that could be changed, but in the connections I'd rebuilt, in the truth I'd fought for, in the authentic self I'd reclaimed. Sometimes the most painful messages can be the beginning of our greatest transformations. And sometimes when we think we've lost everything, we discover we've actually found our way back to what matters most: truth, courage, and the people who truly love us. The journey wasn't over, of course. There would be difficult days ahead, moments when old hurts resurfaced. But we would face them together now, with honesty and courage, with a commitment to truth that wouldn't be compromised. That perhaps was the most important lesson of all: even after the most devastating betrayals, healing is possible. Not through magical transformations or easy forgiveness, but through the hard daily work of facing truth, setting boundaries, and choosing courage over comfort. As I turned off the gallery lights and stepped into the cool evening air, I felt a peace that had eluded me for years. Home wasn't a place that could be taken away by changing locks. It was something I carried within me, something I could rebuild, something that belonged to me alone. And that was a truth no one could ever steal.